Hi, and welcome to the Vocal Prize Podcast, the podcast about linguistic discrimination.
I'm Megan Figueroa.
And I'm Carrie Gillen.
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's good, but also sad because it's my last day before I go back to work after a nice
That's right.
3.5 long week break.
Oh, that sounds so nice.
Yeah.
Was the break nice at least for you?
It was good, but more stressful than it should have been because I decided I needed to move. And so I spent more time than I intended on looking at places and anyway. But I found a nice new place, brand new place. So
Oh,
yes, it's
exciting.
Yeah, it's opening September 1st and I'm moving in the middle of the month, but technically my lease doesn't actually start till October 1st. So yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, me too.
We were trying to think of what we were going to talk about in the intro, and you had an idea, and I was like, what? Tell me more.
So. Yeah, you were like, why? Yeah, so actually this comes from Diego Diaz, Patreon extraordinaire. Patron extraordinaire.
Love you, Diego.
So what he sent was a podcast about BTS. So do you know anything about BTS?
Just that they are extremely popular.
An extremely popular K-pop band.
K-pop, yes. Yeah.
The Grammy Awards, I guess, decided they were going to add a new category of Best Asian Pop Music Performance.
Okay. Because there's so much K-pop happening, I'm guessing.
I assume it's the K-pop and the J-pop and other Asian pop. But the BTS decided that this is bad. So quote, "We've decided not to enter the Grammys this year. I hope music itself can be heard and loved rather than being distinguished by region or language."
Oh, this is like the Oscars with the best foreign film kind of thing.
Similar, but the best foreign is everything outside of the U.S.
True.
This is a little bit more narrow.
But the Grammys has for a very long time had best Latino or Spanish language.
Yes.
Yeah. My feeling about that, maybe I'm not thinking nuanced enough, but I'm it's good because then, Bad Bunny broke all of that, right? So he won for overall, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of Spanish language music that wouldn't win something like Bad Bunny could win, but they can be recognized.
Right.
It's just interesting, yeah.
I tend to agree that it gives other languages opportunities to get awards. Not all the languages in the world, but at least more than just English, right?
Yeah.
Because you can break out like Bad Bunny, but he's super, super talented and just things kind of just broke in his way too, right? There was no guarantee that he would break out in Spanish.
No, absolutely not.
I kind of agree with you that more is better.
Okay, this is very ignorant. BTS mainly sings in Korean, right?
I think they probably do English and Korean, I'm gonna guess.
Yeah.
But Korean probably primarily. I don't actually know. We had that one episode on
I know on K-pop,
and that's kind of the limit
your
of
knowledge.
My knowledge.
Yeah. Well, and then I'm thinking BTS is so popular, but it's quite niche at the same time. So I don't know if they could do a Bad Bunny. I don't know if it's
right. I don't right now. I don't think that Asian pop could break out in that particular way. Maybe they would eventually, but also I kind of feel like getting these intermediate Grammys, is that a fair thing to call them? I don't know, but these other more specialized Grammys will lead to more brand recognition, get their names out more. I don't know. To me it feels okay to have these extra categories rather than not.
I'm just thinking about Bad Bunny again, and it's there are so many Spanish language speakers in the US, but it's he transcends that too. So there are people that do not understand Spanish at this point that don't care.
Yes.
They're listening to Bad Bunny. And that's also true about BTS. I know a lot of people that listen to BTS don't speak Korean. I don't know. It just on the surface, and maybe I'm missing something right now, but it doesn't seem like a bad thing.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is what the Grammys said when they announced this new category. It, quote, recognizes artistic excellence in Asian pop music performances originating from or widely recognized within Asian markets, including, but not limited to, K-pop, J-pop, and C-pop, with meaningful use of one or more Asian languages. So you can't just have English. It wouldn't count. It would have to be at least whatever language, and then English could be sprinkled in.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, this seems like an okay category to create, but I'm not in the words. I'm not in music. I'm not Korean, an artist.
Asian, American.
I'm not Asian. Yeah, I'm not Asian, Canadian, or Asian. I don't know. It's tricky, I guess. I don't know.
The only comparison I have is thinking about like the Latin and the Spanish language.
Yeah, which I think is a fair comparison. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close, parallel, right?
Yeah. And I think it also speaks to the fact that it's like really made an impact on Americans. You know, like I think it's finally like a good recognition that saying like we can't ignore this anymore, like kind of thing.
Yeah. So like speaking from a Canadian perspective, like we had to like create these Canadian content rules to like actually support Canadian musicians and other artists, and I think it worked. It helped get some people very famous, like Bryan Adams. And some people only Canadian famous.
Canadian.
But it's still, but like still they have like they can live off of their work, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, it's not the same thing, but it's similar. It's like, okay, I'm providing you a way to get recognition. And that can only lead to more recognition. I don't know. There's another quote here. This is from the CEO, the Recording Academy CEO, Harvey Mason. Quote, I do want to clarify something that seems to be getting lost in the conversation. The Asian pop category was created to celebrate the depth, diversity, and extraordinary growth of pop artistry coming out of Asia. The spirit of this new category is to shine a dedicated spotlight on these important artists. More categories mean more artists' work is recognized. It's never to divide, but to expand who is recognized by our 15,000 Grammy voters. And yeah, that's how I feel too. Am I wrong?
I know. I'm like, I must be missing something. Like, and I don't want to like, this may be more generous when it comes to like an institution like the Grammys, but it's like one of those things where it feels like look at this like contribution that Asian pop and Asian music is making in the US. It doesn't look like they are going to win something like Album of the Year, but they deserve recognition kind of thing. Like,
right, and I do think it's a stepping stone to maybe getting to that kind of place.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Also, when I say, like, they may not earn, like, Album of the Year, not to say that they don't, like, deserve it. It's just, like, thinking about the institution, that's not going to probably happen.
It's not going to happen overnight, no.
Yeah.
But it might happen over time when you have these baby steps in between. Because I really do believe Bad Bunny is where he is partially because there was the baby step of Latin Grammys, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe he could have broken out without that, but that seems unlikely, just given the way that the culture works.
Right. And, you know, I'm thinking about, like, the Super Bowl halftime show. Like, there are still people in the culture that are like, why is it all in Spanish? But no, like...
But that was incredible.
I know. But him, like, being at the Super Bowl halftime show also speaks to, like, he's winning a Grammy. You know, like, that kind of, like, he's a Grammy award-winning artist kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now they can't be recognized for it because they're pulling themselves out of contention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is their right. They're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I just think they're wrong. They're wrong to do so, but that is their right. But you did have something to say about this band, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. So earlier this month, the band members RM and J-Hope went to a Chris Brown concert. It says near Toronto. I don't know why I would say near Toronto, not just in Toronto. Rogers Stadium.
It was in Toronto.
Rogers Stadium is in Toronto? Okay.
No, that was Toronto.
So, yes, on August 12th, RM and J-Hope attended a Chris Brown concert. Ooh, co-headlining concert with Usher and Chris Brown. I did not realize Usher. God, fuck Usher.
God damn it, Usher. I thought better of you. I don't know why I did, but...
I know, right. So not only did they attend the concert, but they took a backstage photo with Brown. This whole thing led to an anti-violence organization that had in 2024 put RM on the role model list for his efforts to confront internalized misogyny, support women in the arts, and speak out against violence toward women. They took him off the list because Chris Brown notoriously violent toward women.
Yeah, those pictures of Rihanna, like,
I know,
are burned into my brain.
I know.
I guess maybe that makes me feel better about being like, no, you're wrong, BTS.
Yeah.
As uncomfortable as I am to be like, but you're wrong, because I don't know. Right. I'm not in that community in any way. And
you know what, another thing I just realized? Just because you're nominated in the Asian category doesn't mean you can't be nominated for Grammy of the Year or, you know, Record of the Year and Album of the Year.
You could be in other categories. Yeah. It doesn't preclude you. So I don't fully understand the division. Like, you could all be in just one big category, but that just means this is what used to happen back in the day. You'd only get basically white artists and maybe like a handful of black artists, right?
Right.
Like, now that we have more categories, more people get celebrated, and eventually at least some of them will get to the Album of the Year or whatever.
Yeah.
So
so not cool. RM and J-Hope. I don't know if they've released any statements or anything about it, but this is all happened earlier.
I mean, what can they possibly say? Oh, we love his music more than we love women? Like, ew.
Right. Also, like, then what's up with the photo backstage?
Well, I mean, it's bad no matter what, but the photo makes it extra worse. It's like there's nothing. Anyways,
also the music's not that good. From what I remember, I have not listened to Chris Brown since then.
I don't even know if I could pick out a Chris Brown song, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think I could anymore either. I never listened. He was never a fan.
The first time I even heard of who he was the Rihanna thing. So, I mean, like, that makes it really easy for me to be like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Although I would have said it anyway, but
yeah,
I'm sure I heard his music, but he just never stuck out to me. Like, not like Kanye or I don't know whoever else was around at the same time.
Or Usher.
Or Usher, Usher, definitely.
Yeah. Although he's pretty sketchy too. Anyway, probably.
Apparently.
Anyway. Yeah.
Happy end of August.
Happy end of August. It's a fun episode.
Yeah, fun episode of all about the alphabet of all things.
Yeah. So enjoy.
So today we're very excited to have Dr. Danny Bate, who is a linguist, writer, broadcaster, and podcaster, who is fascinated by the study of historical languages and etymology. He has a BA from the University of York, an MPhil from the University of Cambridge, and a PhD from the University of Edinburgh. He can be found online at dannybate.com, on social media at dannybate4, and at dannybate.bsky.social, and at his podcast, A Language I Love Is. But today, we're having him on the show because he wrote Why Q Needs You, a history of our letters and how we use them. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really appreciated. I feel very welcome already. And you can tell that actually I think the publisher wrote that biography. I didn't. I prefer the word obsessed rather than fascinated.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah. Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm fascinated by some things. Obsessed is a different level. It's a whole different level.
It's true.
Yeah. Like, you can also be fascinated with something that, like, you don't particularly like, right?
That's true.
You know?
You can sort of be morbidly fascinated or, sort of in a weird way.
Exactly.
But no, it just goes to the level of straightforward obsession, to be honest. Before you rang, I was reading a book about the Germanic languages prehistory, a cozy Sunday afternoon read. I'm obsessed.
Oh, nice.
Wow. This is giving me my favorite, my favorite English teacher in high school. She said her favorite book was the dictionary. Like, straight up, like, serious. Like, and then she introduced me to the Oxford English Dictionary. So, like, it was the first time I was like, oh, etymology. So, like, yeah, that was ninth grade. So I was about 14. I was like, etymology, this is really neat. So I thank her to this day. Like, she was fantastic.
I just see that as efficient. I mean, once you've read the dictionary, every other book is just a remix.
Yeah.
Amazing. How is that not a bumper sticker? I know how you love bumper stickers, Carrie.
I do. Not that I have a car to put them on anymore, but... Okay, so we always ask anyone who comes on to talk about a book, why did you want to write this book and why now?
Yeah, I wanted to write this book because I love public linguistics, so doing what you two do, sharing our beloved field with a broad audience. And the medium that comes most naturally to me and that I get the most out of is writing. If you leave me alone, left on my own devices for a while, I just start writing something. It's great fun. But the thing is that, of course, for a book, which seemed like the most obvious expression of writing, because it's writing that I could actually get paid for, doesn't happen very often, it needs to grab people's attention. And my background, actually, my PhD was in syntax, historical syntax, so the word order of ancient languages. And while I think it's brilliant, it's not really going to grab people off the shelves of your local bookshop. And that's okay. I've made my peace with that. What I did settle on, something that also scratches the history itch for me and could open the door to a lot of topics that I care about, would be the alphabet, which people remember learning as opposed to, say, word order or speech, which we tend to learn at sort of pre-conscious or pre-memory stage. And also people have opinions about. And yet the alphabet is so successful that it fits very unobtrusively into our lives. So it's maybe a topic that people would like to rediscover and figure out all these quirks and things that they've never really had the time to look into properly, and to package that up in an enjoyable and, I hope, correct and accurate way. So that's the birth of Why Q Needs You. It's a thoroughly linguistic, historical and archaeological book. I've tried to maintain academic standards while writing this book, but try to also tend to get the general readership on board too.
And I think you succeed. Like, it's very readable, and yet, at least all the things that I do know about, they are accurate.
Thank you.
Which is a very small amount, actually. It's shocking how little I knew when it came to the history, so it was really fun.
Yeah, and it's something that we are forced into at a very young age. Like, it's not culturally something that all, like, caregivers do, but there is this idea of, like, let's get my kid to, like, recite the alphabet. Like, let's learn the alphabet. I like you're very nuanced about how, like, writing and speech are fundamentally separate is really important to me, because I studied for my PhD child language development. And there's this conflation these days where pediatricians even, like, are spreading this idea, and, like, you know, just mainstream media, that these things aren't fundamentally separate. So when kids are like, oh, maybe they're like, why isn't my kid learning the ABCs? Is he's like, it's different than developing their speech or their sign. Right. And so, like, I just, like, really appreciate that distinction. I think it comes up in interesting ways when it comes to orthography and the ABCs.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. Yes, and it's so loaded as well because, of course, it's all bound up in the idea of writing, of having writing as very prestigious. And if you don't have writing, or your culture doesn't have writing, it's therefore somehow subordinate or inferior. And history just does not back that up. I would only add that just the relationship between the two, I don't want to say they are somehow, like, completely separate. The relationship is so complex that sometimes it just makes my head hurt to get around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of had to briefly introduce the reader to this very complicated, very interdependent relationship in a very short space of time through the introduction to the book. And just the other day, people got in touch in response to an interview that I gave, and they got in touch with regards to, like, Chinese characters in Japan that have been adopted. They're kanji in Japanese, these characters. And not only is their phonological representation, so what they sound like, completely different because, you know, the Chinese languages and Japanese are so different, but now their meaning has shifted as well. So to describe that relationship between these two characters that are now increasing, they were always different in sound and are increasingly different in meaning. It was just an excellent window. I was grateful for the question. It's an excellent window into this seriously complicated relationship, which I will say this, and I would love your opinions on this, is pretty overlooked in linguistics, the academic field.
Oh, yes. Yes, for sure it is.
I think it's so important that we actually do start looking at this, because what's happening, again, like I said, like there's this conflation even in the field where it's like, no, we need to separate the development of speech or sign from the learning of the alphabet, of writing, of this, because development is something that is natural. And to learn the system of writing this is an artificial system that was created. It's learning, development, learning. Like there is like, you have to put effort into it. So like when I hear people say like, oh, I'm so bad at English, they're always like talking about how they can't spell very well, or like they're very, like they feel like they're poor at writing. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with being bad at English. Like, I mean, that's not, so like this conflation makes it so I think a lot of people are very insecure.
Yes, absolutely.
About their ability to communicate.
And they are communicating these perceived insufficiencies and insecurities completely fluently in speech, which they have no recognition of and no appreciation of how well they are doing and how awesome that is as a thing.
I know.
Yes.
I know. I know that also reminds me, I don't know if you perceive this as being like an insult, but when I hear people say they write just as they speak, I always feel like people are trying to be negative about that. I wonder what you feel about that. Is that kind of tied into that too?
I'd say
this
so.
Like complex relationship? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a comment on their sense of skill, their sense of education, of course, because when you have a writing system that perhaps is somewhat removed from speech, somewhat or entirely removed from speech, where let's say it's based on an altogether different principle. I don't know, I always reach for Chinese characters, but you could go into, say, the history of certain writing systems where you really needed to be a professional scribe to get on with, say, cuneiform or very, top level Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's all bound up with education, how much time, how much money, your background, where you come from. So when you feel like you are not there with something like, say, English, which is increasingly removed from speech, as English just, progresses over time, diversifies over time, I mean, in terms of accents, then it takes conscious learning to know this is speech and this is how it gets written down. It's not particularly phonemically obvious from speech, increasingly so. So it's very much a reflection of these people's sense of their own education, and that really there's no appreciation for just how fluent they are in the medium of speech. We take speech really for granted.
I got chills.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for saying all of that. That's the perfect encapsulation of, I really want my listeners. Carrie doesn't have any listeners. I really want our listeners our listeners to hear that. I think that was I just want to emphasize that I think that was a really important point you just made.
Thank you very much. It's just amusing that Carrie has no listeners. They just block their ears.
What a betrayal, Megan. What a betrayal.
I know. What is it, a Freudian slip? Oh my goodness.
I guess.
But if I may, and I know I should be the one having the questions asked to me, but I'm so interested in gathering people's experiences of the study of writing. I come from pretty typical Western linguistics as a scholar, as an academic, and it really did not include writing. And through the book, I've actually been welcomed into a lovely community of people who are trying to redress that, who are trying to really focus in on writing, not just in terms of the way that writing encodes language, but also, say, the motor skills involved and the way that writing is used as art, not just for simply communicating facts. And all of this has been really new to me, and these people are really trying to redress an imbalance. But how about you two? It seems in my experience that, if you studied writing as part of linguistics, it's to do with personalities and it's to do with luck, frankly.
Yeah, I would say that my education in linguistics, there was nothing about writing except there was a little bit of touching upon it when I was actually at ASU where I met Carrie, because some of my courses were cross-listed with TESOL. So that's when I would hear some professors kind of talk about writing and how that might be an issue for second language learners. But that was it. And it was very cursory and just a matter of fact that this might be a thing. But yeah, in my core linguistic education, I learned that there were lots of different writing systems. I think that was just in Ling 101. But yeah, that's about it. What about you, Carrie?
I would say, yeah, in my linguistics courses, I learned very little about it, like just like some very basic facts like Phoenician, blah, blah, blah. But I learned a little tiny bit more about writing because of the First Nations aspect of it all. So like Cree has a syllabary. So I learned a little bit about the development of that. I learned a tiny amount about the Mi'kmaq hieroglyphs, a little tiny bit about the Mayan stuff. So it's like, it was all very surface level and interesting, but it just wasn't like, my particular interest was, like formal syntax and formal semantics. And so that's like just so far removed from writing. Yeah.
Well, I also will say that I did make like educated like thoughts about writing, because I was thinking like when I was learning about phonology and stuff, I was like, oh, no wonder Spanish is so much easier to write, because it's like there are 5 vowels and like, and they're represented by 5 different,
symbols.
So I was like, okay, yeah. And then when you hear that, like, some English speakers have, like, 14 different vowels, and we have, like, 5 symbols to represent, like, oh, no wonder. So, like, it was that. But it was never, like, there was never...
On that score, also a little bit of historical linguistics also, because you have to know like the Great Vowel Shift and all these things. And so that's why things are written slightly differently or pronounced the same or whatever. So yeah, a tiny sprinkling throughout.
Yeah, but even with the Great Vowel Shift, the writing it won't be front and center. It'll be very much a sort of secondary epiphanies of like, that's how these words are spelt and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, that revelation, I mean, that like English has more than 5 vowels. I get it. I don't want to be a pedant in these things. I get that it's shorthand for thinking about for speaking about writing, right? We have these 5 debated, possibly 6, what is why at the end of the day, but we have these 5 characters that we've inherited and we think of as the vowel sounds. I get it, because it's an easy shorthand for speaking about the linguistic medium, i.e. writing, that I think is foremost in our minds, is what we think of as the thing expressing language. We see writing as primary, we hear speech as somehow secondary, despite the fact that, developmentally, evolutionary, historically, that's the wrong way around. And then sort of the mind-blowing facts. I mean, this is just a thread that starts to unravel the whole tapestry, because then very quickly you're on to big things like arguably the most common vowel in English today doesn't have its own letter, which is schwa, right? So this is the default sound. And then arguably maybe, this I am treading on areas which I'm not too sure of, but then arguably the most common consonant of English, which is the glottal stop, also doesn't have its own sound. So all of these things are going on, and it's suddenly, this is like the tiny chinks in the armor, then the whole edifice of writing as somehow this perfect representation of speech, it all just crumbles quite quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. I will say, actually, I'm being unfair, and I don't remember which professor showed me this, but do you know the poem, The Chaos, by Gerard?
Oh, yes.
Trinité? Carrie?
I think so, yeah.
It's like, so what are they? This is a classic English poem containing about 800 of the worst irregularities of English spelling and pronunciation. So like starts dearest creature in creation, studying English.
Yeah. It's in the book. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
I will teach you.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
That's why I was like, yeah, because I hadn't thought about it in years, and no wonder. No wonder it was right on the surface of my mind. I read your book a little while ago. We had this scheduled for a while, so I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, but so why do you put that in there? Like, what are you hoping a reader, like, they're reading this? Because it's kind of hard to, if I were to, like, recite this out loud, it would be very hard for me. But, like, visually... Yeah. What does it do?
I suppose it's one of those chinks in the armor, if I can use that phrase again. It's one of those moments when you start to, you're forced to really think about writing and reading. We are so good at reading and writing, and I really do mean that, everybody. We can compute and either actively compute or sort of passively remember so much information about writing that actually the contemplation of it doesn't come very naturally to us. Apart from maybe our elementary schooling, we don't tend to think so much about it. And the poem is just a great way into the problems with spelling and the complicated relationship between English speech and the way that English gets written down. I suppose then more specifically to me, that poem, which is often mentioned in what few books about writing there are, are. It was very helpful for me because it serves the purpose, or many purposes of the book as its author. One is that it sets the tone of this is a fun book. I am not going to, harangue you with things that you should know. It's more about getting the reader on board, telling this is going to be fine, this is going to be fun. And I suppose secondly, in that initial introduction, I did also have to set out some of the method of the book. So in this book, it was very important to me that I use certain things like the IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet.
Yeah.
That really matters to me for various reasons of precision and technical terminology and the fact that I believe it is accessible to all. It's not immediately accessible. Of course, I as the author have to do a lot of work to make sure the reader and I are on the same page. Sometimes I don't manage it, but that was a perfect example. I think that really does take us back to kind of linguistics 101 with your first lectures, if you studied at a university, of like, here's writing, we need to be able to write about speech, and here's why English spelling is not trustworthy. And it's just a great fun example that communicates a lot in a very short page space. So with that on board, we can get started.
I like the idea of like it being like a fun introduction to it. Like, it's so true. You need to like get the reader on board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, I'm thinking about the spelling bee just happened, right? The scripts. And it's funny because like they were showing clips and I was looking at it or looking at some of the clips, and one, like, it's so weird because the person that gives the words will say it and I'm just like, okay, I'm not as good as these kids because like I'm not getting it. But once the kid spells it, I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense to me, like given like what I've learned over the years about like how wild spelling is. But it's like there's just, like we can't rely on the spoken word to get to the written word. It was just such a good illustration of that for me.
And the fact that many countries with a particular standard language and a particular standard writing system don't have spelling bees because they would be very boring.
They'd be incredibly boring.
They would not make for good TV.
That's a really good point. I've never thought about that, but it's so true.
If you were to take something like, I don't know, Italy, something like that, standard Italian writing, it's pretty good. It's pretty phonemic. It's a pretty good one-to-one scale of like one letter to one phoneme of Italian, occasionally two letters for certain sounds in certain contexts. I would make the claim, before the big fans of Italian and German start, feeling proud, what has happened to English, this divergence between spelling and speech, can happen to you too. Like, let's not, don't get on your high horse just yet. There's a natural sound change is already starting to creep in. So, if you give the example of, say, normal, let's say, standard Italian spelling, an S between two vowels is now a Z sound. It's voiced, a very reasonable change, an intervocalic voicing. So like la casa, which I think is old-fashioned / archaic / formal, is now for most people la casa. So it's happening. It's starting already. But I just wanted to add as well to the thing about the spelling bee, that I assume that you two as scholars will know this awful feeling of making sure you've covered all the bases. You tried to make a point and you've got to mention all the mitigating factors, the relevant points to try and say something, anything, right? And the thing is, I talk a lot about spelling. I am very happy to talk about the pros and cons of English spelling and the pros and cons of reforming it, of making changes. And it's one of those topics where I can't say anything too definitive too confidently. Because if I say things like, that spelling needs to suit our purposes, yes, one of our purposes is to accurately write down the sounds of speech. But a spelling bee and all this fanfare, all this competition around it that you have in the States is a purpose of spelling. It's a way that it's used. So I kind of have to bear that in mind. If we reform spelling, all of the fun, all of the competitions and infrastructure around the spelling bee just disintegrates. And maybe people would, kids would lose out and people might lose their jobs in the process. So all of these things need to be borne in mind.
Yeah.
Ben Zimmer might not be happy.
Shout out to former guest Ben Zimmer, friend of the pod.
Speaking of former guests, I also wanted to mention, like, one of our former guests, Tim Brooks, also talked about, like, the art of writing. And we do need to remember that it is an art form. And he also mentioned the fact that, like, to print is just so boring in comparison to, like, us actually using our hands to write. And that skill is being lost, apparently. Like, children are not being taught necessarily, in some schools still, but a lot of schools are not being taught how to, like, especially cursive, which, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is kind of like a skill. Whether it's necessary or not is another issue. But
Well, of course. Firstly, very happy shout out to Tim Brooks. He was actually the person I was obliquely mentioning because I've had great conversations with him.
Yeah, Tim.
I do. And lovely and very committed, to all of this and bringing a lot of people together who are kind of working in very disparate fields related to writing. Tim is great fun. He's quite happy to put me on a different path in conversation. Be like, no, Danny, you're thinking linguistically again. I'm like, yeah, I guess I am. Yes, okay. Fair's fair. It's a fair cop. But the thing is, then you've given me another example of how it's very hard to speak very neutrally and completely accurately. If I want to say something like, the importance of these motor skills and the fact that, children are losing the ability to write manually as opposed to just typing, I am implicitly including my own values in this because I like handwriting. I write a lot of things by hand. To make the definitive non-personal case for these skills is actually, I think it's quite hard. Our society now is increasingly print-based. It's increasingly technologically oriented towards typing. I will often have to check myself and make sure that I am not just being, a slightly conservative thinking linguist. And what is the definitive argument for these motor skills? I believe it is there to be made, but it's definitely one of those things over and over again when it comes to writing where I have to check my own biases and also appreciate and gain another example of how writing is always reflecting the present day. There is no writing in a vacuum. There's no writing in a bubble. It's certainly something that, YQ Needs You has hammered into me, is just how much the alphabet reflects the present day and whoever happens to be using it.
I am fairly convinced that the fine motor skills are important for other things beyond printing or cursive, but I'm also not an expert. So I will cop to that my gut feeling is that it's not just about the actual physical printing itself, but I have heard from teachers, whether they're right or wrong, that their manual skills are less good because they're not developing these finer motor skills.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and to your point, and also Tim's point about kind of handwriting being an art, for one thing, and things being lost if we are going toward this, losing that, is that I'll be in a program, I don't know if it's Canva or something, making something, and they'll group fonts in something called handwritten. So they're trying to simulate handwritten as a font. And I'm I just keep thinking about how that speaks to this idea that yeah, even through fonts, we're realizing that there's something that is captured differently when it's handwritten or that feeling of being handwritten. But it's yeah, I don't know. It's so complicated. I have so many complicated feelings about it because I also like to handwrite things.
Me too.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and I would also, in addition to the motor skills, I think there are also cognitive skills to be gained as well.
Yeah,
probably.
When I research, when I write, I make all my notes by hand. The actual, typing, there's basically nothing that will become the finished product from me is written out by hand. That tends to be, but my notes are always handwritten in one of my just empty notebooks. I think that process of putting it into my own words, looking away from the screen, and for that split second of short-term memory thinking, well, what have I just read? Do I know it in some short or long form? Committing that to the page. This is anecdotal, but it's been very helpful for me.
Yeah.
I know that there is some research that's been recently not replicated, but whatever. The original research was that people taking notes by hand, they retained it better than when they were typing it. It didn't replicate, but I still, in my gut, feel like there's got to be something there.
Yeah, and I have ADHD, so I have working memory issues, and I feel like I have to write it down, or am I typing it? It just it pretty much is I didn't hear it. I feel like it was really helpful. Sure. This is all just, what is this? This is a public service announcement episode for writing things by hand.
Or at least trying it out,
it is. Well, in some weird way, I suppose it would be a public service episode part 2 because Tim would have said all these things already.
Yeah, that's true.
And he did.
That's true. Yeah, he did. But in a different way.
Yeah. I think maybe we got ahead of ourselves, Carrie. maybe we need to actually define what is orthography versus spelling.
Yeah, okay, so spelling versus orthography versus writing, these are big terms. And of course, two of those terms are much better than one of them, which is, of course, orthography. So I would say that what you have with, firstly, with writing is the writing is perhaps the one that feels most familiar and yet at the same time might be the hardest to pin down, in that it's some sort of linguistic communication in a non-speech medium. And instantly there are elements of that definition that might make someone like Tim Brooks go, I don't like that. So it's difficult because, writing it tends to be linguistic and connected to the language of whoever is producing it, but nonetheless it might not be for communicative purposes. It might be for art, as we've already mentioned. Then you have spelling, and spelling, that has a fantastic history as a word because, of course, it is kind of related to spells and magic and things like that. So it's all bound up in a lot of complicated medieval history, but spelling tends to be used with phonemic-based writing systems. Of course, people don't tend to talk about, say, meaning-based writing systems, one where the meaning of the word or morpheme is the thing that you're representing. That's the basis for Chinese characters, for example. I haven't heard people talk about Chinese spelling so much, but maybe they do. That's something that emerges out of a European context, and it's to do with writing down sounds, and that can have incredible diversity. And yet, as time goes by, a particular way of spelling may gain more prestige over others, and it may gain prestige in quite an organic process, but then it gain prestige perhaps more artificially as it's picked up by, say, nation states or regional states, and it gets sort of official blessing, and it's spread about through, departments of education and schools, and it's spread about through newspapers, and there's kind of a huge push towards this particular way of spelling a language. And by the time it's reached that status, it tends to be called orthography. So that's from Greek, two words, ortho or orthos, meaning like right or correct, graphe, graphene in ancient Greek to do with writing. So, these are kind of recognizable morphemes from many English words. Orthodontists set teeth right, and orthographists determine spelling as well. And this is a long old process, and I think it's so interesting how the fact that there is one particular way of spelling is not a given. It's extremely bound up in the circumstances of the present, in our hierarchical societies and our politics as well. And it's bound up in, does your language have prestige and political power as well? If you go back to what I think is the best time period, which is the Middle Ages, it actually doesn't make much sense to talk about orthography. We see so much variation, especially in languages which are somehow, they're everyday vernaculars, but they're not being committed to writing so much. That's the territory of, say, Latin or Greek or, classical Arabic or something like that. Whereas Middle English and Middle French and Middle High German, things like that, they're being written down, but not that often. And consequently, we see incredible variation in spelling that reflects people just trying things out, people spelling without a rule book. It reflects dialect as well. So there are lots of dialects, so much more variation on the ground. And even then, if I wind the clock back even further, if you take things back to antiquity, even Latin has tremendous diversity. I actually am quite hesitant, probably not as hesitant as I should be, to talk about standard Latin spelling, because actually so much of Latin spelling is transmitted to us via the Middle Ages, via monks and their particular way of spelling, and then modern editions of Latin texts. If you actually look at what documents that we have from antiquity, which is the minority of Latin texts, there's variation, incredible variation. I was in the British Museum, where, so many of the ancient world's objects have ended up over the years, the other day, and I found examples of the same words or the same sounds being spelt differently in two Latin inscriptions, because you could, and that was kind of okay. So standard spelling, it's an orthography, it's a very modern thing. That's the point I'm trying to get at here.
Mm-hmm. Didn't Shakespeare even spell his own name differently?
Great example.
He sure did. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that. William Shakespeare being the title, the author of all of your books. That's one of the ways.
Definitely.
Yeah. Either he wrote that, or that's on his birth certificate or the kind of baptism certificate from when he was a baby. And just imagine that, your complete works, first folio edition by William Shakespeare. It's not the same.
The jokes just write themselves.
Yeah. Well, he probably wrote them to begin with. So yeah.
That's true.
Because I think anybody who's had even just a slight bit more than introduction to Shakespeare will know that Shakespeare would have found that very funny.
Yes. Oh, 100%. You actually brought up spelling reform a while back, and I did want to ask you about that. Like, what are your thoughts about reforming the English spelling system? Systems, really.
What are my thoughts? Numerous, that would be one. Complicated would be another. Frustratingly uncommitted would be another one. I think, I literally wrote, I didn't write the book, but I wrote a book about the history of English spelling. I could not tell the reader at the end of it, what are we going to do about English spelling? I think maybe some sub-points that I can make with some confidence would be that we should be open to spelling reform. We should be open just to the possibility in general, in a very kind of theoretical, grand kind of way. And that might be reflected in appreciating variation in spelling, appreciating some people's, let's say, non-standard spelling, as they, spell could of, of, because it rhymes with of. It doesn't rhyme. It sounds the same as the words, of, that unstressed auxiliary have. That's a kind of pretty prominent example. But there's something like, getting rid of the H in the word ghost. That would not make any obvious difference to our interpretation and reading of that word. G-O-S-T, it would rhyme with host, it would rhyme with most, so all of the kind of orthographic principles are in line with getting rid of that. And it's not only, it's one of those things where it doesn't actually have any sort of basis in sound. This is basically a Low Countries, a Dutch import into early English printing, because the people involved in setting up the printing systems in the late medieval period in England are very much they're in connection with the continent. So, it's Gutenberg in Germany who sets up the printing press in Europe, and it travels to England via the Low Countries, and it's kind of like a Dutch bit of interference. And I like it for that, because I'm a nerdy historical linguist. But my biases are not generalizable, and I think we should be open to the fact that we could get rid of it. We could make these small changes, like getting rid of the B in debt and doubt, which is, as is quite well known, it's this sort of like a reclassified spelling where people are just putting it back into words because it was there in Latin. It's never been there in English. It's never been pronounced in English. So all of these little things are like micro reforms, often called spelling mistakes. More long-windedly, I might prefer organic micro reforms.
I like it.
I'm really open to them. But then you have the big picture stuff. Then you have, let's say, the movements, the existing movements that really have, are ongoing to kind of completely overhaul English spelling. And this is a good idea for several reasons. It's a good idea because it would put English back on track with speech. So that's fine. That's an admirable thing to aim for. But basically, you have to answer, how can I put this? Firstly, it ignores a lot of alternative principles of reading. So we don't just read sounds. We don't just read letters as sequences of sounds and basically kind of match them up to existing words. We also read words as sort of chunks of meaning. This is often how adults tend to read. We don't sound out the letters in any part of the process. We just identify the chunk of meaning with the space either side on the page or on the screen. And with this in mind, English's quite conservative spelling system kind of works and is helpful, at least in terms of reading. So, keeping homophones, words that sound the same, spelt differently, can nonetheless be an aid to the reader because you quickly whiz through them on the line of text. You quite quickly see that there, the three types of there are different, or something like sun and sun the child and sun the thing in the sky, or sight and sight, the place and the action of seeing. I think there was like a whole skit on 30 Rock about this, the sitcom 30 Rock it was called Homophones or something like that.
Your shows are terrible. I mean, have you seen that new game show Homonym?
Your next word is meat.
Oh boy. Like when two people run into each other.
Sorry, it's the other one. Your next word is stare.
Okay, the things you climb up to get...
It's the other one.
It's always the other one. Let me see the card.
No! Never!
Your shows stink, Jack.
It was very funny. So that's a kind of alternative principle. So, okay, fine. We chuck out that principle. We ignore that and we put everything back on a phonemic basis. Okay, grand. But then, whose speech? What kind of spoken English is going to be? If we are going to bring it back to speech, then I'm sorry, at that point we are talking about Englishes plural. because a redesign of English spelling according to how you sound, let's say, I mean, it's never going to be purely individual, but let's say we take it to at least a national level, not regional, but national. There was some sort of like, let's say, general American spelling that Americans could get on board with, Canadian spelling that all Canadians or Anglophone Canadians get on board with. British, well, that would be a colossal fight because we Brits have so many accents and so many dialects. An Irish one, yeah, the same thing applies. But let's just say in this, incredible, peaceful, alternative universe that these individual countries could agree on some standard English spelling system. English spelling and perhaps English as a concept is now thoroughly divided. We might have to start talking about Anglian languages or Anglian dialects at this point in time. Basically, English as we know it is dead. So with our kind of, clunky conservative spelling system, it's kind of something, in a grand sense, it might be one of the things that is keeping English as a thing united. And it is, of course, keeping English readers and writers communicating because we can get on board with it no matter what spoken language we're coming from.
Yes, absolutely.
As I said, numerous and complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's pretty much like how I've felt about it for a long time. Like you said earlier, like smaller ones, we could just easily get rid of like any fake B's or whatever. Like there's just some small tweaks we could easily make, kind of like back in the day, dude took out the U that's not really pronounced, like in the US. I spell things with U's, but, I could give that up, I guess. It's not that important to me. But, but the bigger picture things, like, yeah, I agree. I'm on the same page. Like it would either we'd have to choose like one that only reflects one variety and then we'd all be angry that it's not ours. Or we'd have to have at the very least these national ones, which would divide us in, So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big one. And you end up kind of squaring the circle in that, like, I've had one person say, okay, well, maybe to make it fair, we could go back to some sort of like prestigious version of English, okay, already quite loaded, but one that's not current today, but nonetheless has a lot of clout, say like, more traditional British received pronunciation. Maybe we could take it back to that kind of speech, an archaic, conservative variety of speech and make that the basis for our spelling system. And I'm like, well, that's what we've got. That's what we've already got as a system. So admittedly, we'd maybe improve it by a few centuries because the basis for standard English spelling is kind of 15th century. So it is quite antiquated, but you end up proposing quite odd things in this incredible field of spelling reform.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
So I'm so sorry to both of you who are not American, but there's this little thing that Trump is on right now where he's calling, and I'm sorry for this ableist term, he's calling Democrats Democrats. And he's saying, it's pronounced, or it's spelled D-U-M-B. A lot of people don't know that there's a B at the end. I don't know if you've seen this, but he has said it several times. He said, like, he's the first one to tell people that there's a B at the end of this word. And
he just learned that. That's why. He literally learned that.
Right. Like, sorry, it's just like that's what I was thinking of when we were talking about, like, in debt or whatever, or like. But yeah, you're right, Carrie. He just learned how to spell it.
Yeah, but then you end up with like Dumbocrats because,
Right,
because all of these words, crucially, these odd spellings exist in that particular context. We have a kind of sight recognition system where we go, aha, dumb. Okay, I got that word, or let's choose a nicer word, thumb, or something like that. We just recognize it. If you take these words out of that context by, say, compounding them, by putting them together with something else, then quite quickly the recognition system falters, and you revert to read these as a sequence of sounds. This happens all the time. I was actually before we called, I was trying to make a bad pun in an email to somebody, and I wanted to spell Bado. I wonder what it's like to receive an email from me. I really do. This person does not know me. They work in a bookshop, and I'm just trying to kind of generate interest for the book and to have me in as a very enthusiastic guest speaker because I can put on a show. I can tell you that much. And I was trying to make a pun, and I was crucially trying to spell Bado. That's not a word, but like the sequence of sounds, B-A-D-O. And to make sure that my intended recipient, who does not read things in my voice, to make sure that she would read the A as a short A vowel, one of English's so-called, short vowels, I had to double the D. I had to be a BADDO because that's a system of English. So basically what I'm getting at is that because I took the word bad, which I would never read as bade, but because I compounded it into this word, I added an O, I added something before it to kind of make this terrible pun, I instantly had to revert to the systems of the phonemic systems that we have at our disposal in English, which is, say, doubling the consonant letters. We double the D to make sure that the reader knows that it's an A, a short vowel, as in a word like, I don't know, letter, there's 2 T's, or better, there's 2 T's, or I always reach for the example of like Instagrammed with 2 M's so that it's not Instagrammed. So all of these things, like, I don't know what I'm really getting at here. Certainly not a defense of Trump's strange point, but it's not a defense because I think it's a terrible pun to make that will struggle in the medium of writing.
Yeah, especially since Dumbo is at least a name of an elephant, right? Like, so you could easily misread it.
Yeah. And the elephant is the Republican symbol, so I don't know how.
That's true, but but I don't think Dumbo is Republican.
No.
No, that's let's not degrade his character in that way.
Poor elephant. Had nothing to do with any of this.
No, there are some deleted scenes from the cutting room floor where he talks about his fiscal policy. It's very neoliberal. Yeah.
I mean, at least if it was the fiscal stuff, at this point I'd be grateful. It's all this other horrible racism and misogyny that's like
and not
killing us all.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, we should probably ask you, why does Q need you?
Oh. That old chestnut. Yeah. I should have expected this one when I titled the book. I do love this question. And the great thing about it is that the book is organized alphabetically from chapter A through to chapter Z or Z, depending on your persuasion. And thankfully for my benefits, the letter Q is after halfway through the alphabet, which means that a lot of the essential characters in the cast of people that we have to thank for the alphabet have been introduced by this point in time. That's great. The long and short of it is, okay, the really short version, why Q needs you is because of the Romans. That's the really short and very unsatisfactory answer. The slightly, let's say, short to medium answer is that the alphabet's extremely old. It's about 4,000 years old, has its origins most likely in the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt. It's a kind of revamped version of hieroglyphs that are radically repurposed according to a phonemic principle. So 30-ish characters, existing characters, but used for sounds and sounds alone, specifically the sounds of a population of people who were probably quite humble, let's say low to medium in Egyptian society, and immigrants as well, first, third, second generation immigrants who are speaking a different language to Egyptian. They rework hieroglyphs, they get the alphabet up and running, and it passes its way around the Mediterranean. And in our earlier sources, Q is there. It's one of the letters. It's a monkey to begin with, like a hieroglyphic baboon, and capital Q still has a little bit of that tail involved, which I love. That's great. But quite quickly, the letters become abstract, but Q is there, and it's standing for a distinctive sound. The problem is, as the alphabet continues to branch out and passes through very different spoken languages, first Greek and then later Latin, the letter Q is being taken in, and it's already established. The alphabet is already kind of prestigious as this new piece of technology, and people want to use it, but they don't phonemically need this letter. It's needed in the early stages for a language like, say, Phoenician, but quite quickly, if not immediately, it's kind of a superfluous letter for the ancient Greeks. There's hints of evidence that maybe it stood for a kind of allophone of spoken Greek, a kind of back version of the K sound, but very limited evidence. Quite quickly, it's an alternative, it's a rival for kappa, for the letter K. And this is then taken up a notch by the time it lands in the hands of the Romans, because by this point in time, for various reasons, not only is there K, there's also Q, and there's also C. And the Romans absolutely rally behind C as the letter for spelling the K consonant, that, velar sound, voiceless velar. For that reason, they purge K. They take hold of the alphabet, they create their own version of it, and they say, we're not going to use it anymore. But Q, it can stick around because in Latin phonology, probably they make a distinction, a phonemic distinction between k and qu, so velar and labiovelar, as in a word like quis, meaning who in Latin. So that's the origin of, say, French qui, right? And because of that difference, a very debated but, most likely real difference in the brains and mouths of classical Latin speakers, the qu, the labiovelar, can keep its own spelling. And so this is what they use q for, but it needs to be partnered up with u. It looks like a kind of pointy V at this point in time because U and V haven't yet split into two separate letters. That happens centuries later. And that combination, that digraph, can spell the qu sound. The problem is, of course, that, well, that's not great because it's kind of already taking one step away from the phonemic principle of one sound for one letter. There are hints that the Romans experimented with just using Q on its own, but for some reason they don't take that step. So that's how it's used. But then, of course, speech keeps changing as it tends to. Natural sound change actually means that the qu and k later merge, and that's why in a language like Spanish or French, QU is like a k sound on its own for like que or ki or que, right? Long enough, or knowledge of this pronunciation of Q and U survives long enough to make the jump to English when this Roman version of the alphabet starts to write down English. It's actually not there to begin with. In Old English, it's CW, which is very sensible. But especially after 1066, the Normans, more French influence, we then have QU. And ever since, for English, Q has more or less needed U. So there you go.
Sure has.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That was a perfect explanation.
That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And my only counterexample is goddamn Qantas, which has bugged me forever.
Yeah.
Qantas.
The airline.
Oh.
Cantus. Yep.
I know, I always want to pronounce it Qantas, and it's not. It's Qantas. And
So sort of like Arabic.
Because it doesn't have the U.
Like Arabic transliteration.
Yeah.
It should be a uvula cantus or something like that.
Qantas,
but,
yeah,
you know.
exactly.
There's also QWERTY keyboard. There's also qi, the concept of qi from China as well. But that's a
Yes,
nice
that's
kind
true.
of tip for word detectives, because if Q does not need you, it is basically, it's only going to be a recent arrival in English.
Yes. Yeah, QWERTY, at least there's a W. It's close enough. Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you very much.
We're a little bit over time, but I want to ask this last question. What was your favorite letter to write about?
I like that. I really like that phrasing, that specifically about which one I enjoyed writing about. There's always an element of pride with chapter A, because A I used to tell the ultimate origins of the alphabet, so how the whole system gets started back in ancient Egypt. And by the way, A is spookily the perfect place to start about this, because not only is it first, it's also the letter, the capital letter at least, that looks closest to the thing that it originally was, that it represented pictographically, which is a head of cattle. Turn capital A upside down, you have like the mouth, the muzzle of the ox, and then you have the legs, well, they're actually horns originally. So I just love that. But the thing is, the early history of the alphabet is extremely fragmentary. We are working with fragments, and it's very debated because we need to tell a good theory based on what evidence we have. And the spectre of lost evidence, so things that have just not survived because they were written on perishable materials, is a real kind of bugbear. It's a very daunting thing to write about. It makes this whole topic very daunting to write about, because what can we actually say from the evidence? With the help of a scholar, a real expert in the field, I got on board with the field, I wrote about it, I made it fun, I made it accessible, chapter A. So there's a lot of pride in that like I did not lose the reader with the very first chapter talking about things like the acrophonic principle and proto-Sinaitic writing system and stuff like that. So I'm happy if the reader's still on board by the beginning of chapter B. But I would say it would be the chapters that actually were a lot more English focused. English is my native language, and let's say my native writing system. Debated whether that's a thing as a term as well. But I enjoyed all the things that helped me to make a lot more sense of English. And weirdly, actually, the one that perhaps best illustrates that would be chapter U, which I basically use as a chance to really be focused on English, to set out the different ways that English uses the letter U. Aside from whatever it is in QU, arguably it's a W, which is a consonant. That's a semivowel, but okay. The kind of like grouping letters into vowels and consonants is really messy once you start to think about it, because like the U in a word like question is a consonant. Likewise, the I in the word spaniel is kind of a consonant as well, which is odd and whatever Y is, that's quite fun. I digress. The way it's used as a vowel, as a standalone vowel, I identified in my English kind of 4 uses. You have the ones where it stands for like an a short so that's a word like put. There's also the much more common unrounded, like unlipped sound as in a word like but. So for me in my English, but I'm getting confused already. But and put don't rhyme, but they do for many people in Northern England. And in this regard, these Northern English speakers are conservative because that's the result of a split that happened in my English, didn't happen in theirs. But then you have all the French and Latinate words where it's either like a U sound, as in like union or unicorn or unusual. Unusual is great because it's arguably standing for 3 different sounds in each of the U's, and then the ones where it's a long oo. There's no additional semivowel y at the beginning of it. So that would be a word like, I don't know, flute. It's not flute. For some archaic or more conservative speakers, you will hear things like revolution, but that's dying out as a pronunciation. So 4 different ways: u, oo, and behind one letter. And I was aware of this, but having to write about it and make it accessible and make it readable and just put it out on the page was really beneficial for me. And I felt like I learned a lot about English in the process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Almost impossible not to.
Yeah, that was great.
You're such a delight. This was so much fun.
Thank you both. No, thank you.
And I also want to point out that you have epigraphs at the beginning of every chapter, and a lot of them I was like, oh, this reminds me of my dad, because my dad is super into English stuff like Woodhouse and Spike Mulligan and things like that. So I'm gonna have to get it for him for Father's Day. So thank you.
Please do. And with my best wishes. For me, if it was certain influences of my parents, the Spike quote was from my grandfather as well, no longer with us, but taught me the joy of Spike Milligan. And any favorites come to mind? Because they're silly. They're just meant, it's all part of the mission. I want this to be a fun book. Linguistics can be fun.
Oh, yeah. They're all super fun. I don't know. I guess probably the Woodhouse one was the funniest one for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The shrimp.
Yes, exactly. Yes. It's Mr. P. Smith. It's written P. Smith with an extra P. And he said, no, the P is silent, as in shrimp. And it's like, what?
Yes.
There is
it's so good.
There is. I did read an article about this. There is a little bit of historical context to that. Obviously, P.G. Woodhouse is extremely silly, but there is silly with good reason. It's got a sophisticated silliness, my favourite kind of silliness, which is probably, there's an influence that around about that time, some of the lexicographers, like the big James Murray, who set up the Oxford English Dictionary, might be actually pushing people to pronounce the P, the silent P, in words of Greek origin. So like psychology. We have good evidence that someone like Murray actually pronounced it psychic and, pneumatic. Because he can, and we all can, but people just didn't listen to him because he's just one man at the end of the day. And maybe Woodhouse is kind of mocking him in this example,
so.
Which I do love. But,
I think so.
But thanks for mentioning them. That does mean a lot.
So, anything you want to leave our listeners with before we let you go?
I'd only just add as well that there was a real joy as well in that, some of the epigraphs are not famous quotes. They're things that I found online. And they just show how people can have incredible, correct intuitions about the alphabet. Mm-hmm. So there was one at the beginning of chapter T. The epigraph that starts chapter T is T is basically the last great letter before the alphabet goes off the rails, which is a tweet. Mm-hmm. It's a tweet that I found. And that is historically true. It was the traditional end of the alphabet. It was the last letter. So the fact that the subsequent letters, what another tweeter once called the goth letters, which I love, they're all a bit weird after T, is based in history. And that just made me so happy. It had to be, that intuition had to be honored in the book.
100%. Yeah, I also chuckled at that. All right. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, go buy the book.
Yes.
And we always leave our listeners with one final message.
Don't be an asshole.
Don't be an asshole.
Seconded. Or thirded, I guess. Yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again.
The Vocal Fries podcast is produced by me, Carrie Gillen, theme music by Nick Granum. You can find us on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Vocal Fries Pod. You can email us at vocalfriespod@gmail.com, and our website is vocalfriespod.com.